In the spring of 1645, Miyamoto Musashi sat alone in a cave on Mount Iwato, dying. He had survived more than 60 duels without a single defeat. He had killed men with wooden swords, boat oars, and once with nothing but a sharpened stick. But in that cave, with death approaching, he did not write about victory. He did not celebrate his conquests or recount his greatest battles. Instead, he wrote a book about what to eliminate. The final wisdom of the greatest swordsman who ever lived was not about what to add to your life. It was about what to cut away. Most people believe that mastery is built through accumulation. They think strength comes from adding more techniques, more knowledge, more tools, more strategies. They collect books they never read, habits they never sustain, and goals they never achieve. They fill their lives with options, believing that abundance equals power. But Musashi understood something that escapes most people until it's too late. True strength is not found in what you can carry. It is found in what you can set down and walk away from forever. There was a man named David who lived in Seattle, working as a software engineer at a company that promised him equity, growth, and purpose. He was 34 years old, and on paper, his life looked exactly as it should. He had a good salary, a nice apartment, a girlfriend who wanted to marry him, and a promotion within reach. But every morning when he woke up, the first thing he felt was dread. Not sadness, not anger. Just a quiet, suffocating sense that he was living the wrong life. He ignored it for years because ignoring it was easier than confronting what it meant. David spent his evenings scrolling through his phone, watching videos of people who had quit their jobs to travel or start businesses or live on farms in Portugal. He told himself these people were lucky, irresponsible, or naive. He convinced himself that his dissatisfaction was normal, that everyone felt this way, that this was simply what adulthood was. But the feeling grew. It began to show up in his body. His shoulders were always tight. His jaw ached from clenching his teeth at night. He gained weight not because he ate too much, but because he stopped caring. And still he did nothing, because doing nothing felt safer than admitting the truth. The truth was simple, and it terrified him. His job was draining his life force. His relationship, though comfortable, had become a performance. His apartment, filled with furniture he bought to impress no one in particular, felt like a storage unit for a person he no longer was. But he couldn't let go. He couldn't cut anything away, because if he did, he would have to face the emptiness underneath. And that emptiness, he believed, would destroy him. Musashi called this Kenkon no Michi, the way of heaven and earth. It is the principle that all things in nature grow through elimination, not accumulation. A tree does not keep every branch. It sheds the weak ones, so the strong ones can thrive. A river does not carry every stone. It wears them down and lets them go. The samurai understood that the sword is only as strong as the cuts you refuse to make with it. Every unnecessary movement is a vulnerability. Every wasted motion is a door left open for your opponent. Musashi won his duels not because he had more techniques than his enemies. He won because he had fewer. He cut away everything that did not serve the single purpose of victory. And in doing so, he became unbeatable. David's breaking point came on a Tuesday in November. He was in a meeting that had already lasted 90 minutes. His manager was presenting a slide deck about quarterly initiatives, and David realized he couldn't remember a single word that had been said. He looked around the table and saw the faces of people who had been in this company for 10, 15, 20 years. He saw their exhaustion. He saw the way they checked their phones under the table, the way they nodded without listening, the way they had learned to be present without actually being there. And he understood, with absolute clarity, that this was his future. Not next year, not in a decade, right now. He was already one of them. That night he went home and sat on his couch in the dark. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't open his laptop. He just sat there, breathing, feeling the weight of his own life pressing down on him. His girlfriend came home and asked if he was okay, and he said yes, because he didn't know how to explain what he was feeling. She went to bed. He stayed on the couch, and for the first time in years, he let himself think clearly. He asked himself the only question that mattered. If I keep living this way, will I be proud of who I become? The answer was no, and that answer changed everything. Musashi wrote that most people are defeated not by their enemies, but by their own attachments. They cling to comfort, to safety, to the approval of others. They mistake survival for living. They confuse motion with progress. They believe that because they are busy, they must be moving forward. But busyness is not growth. Activity is not purpose. And comfort, Musashi understood, is the slowest form of death. The warrior's path is not about doing more. It is about doing only what must be done. It is about identifying the single cut that will end the fight, and then making it. David did not quit his job the next day. He did not make a dramatic exit or burn any bridges. He simply began to cut. He started small. He deleted every app on his phone except the ones he used daily. He canceled subscriptions he had forgotten he even had. He stopped saying yes to social events that drained him. He stopped pretending to enjoy conversations he didn't care about. He stopped performing the role of the person he thought he was supposed to be. And with each cut, he felt lighter. Not happier, not yet, but lighter, as if he had been carrying a weight so long he had forgotten it was there. Then he made the bigger cuts. He ended his relationship. It was not a fight. It was not a betrayal. It was simply the truth spoken aloud. They had both been pretending for years, and pretending, he realized, was the cruelest thing two people could do to each other. She cried. He cried. But underneath the sadness, there was relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally set down something you were never meant to carry. They were not enemies. They were just two people who had outgrown the story they had been telling themselves. Next, he quit his job. He did not have another one lined up. He did not have a business plan or a backup strategy. He simply walked into his manager's office and said he was done. His manager asked if there was anything they could do to make him stay. David said no, and he meant it. Because he understood now that staying would not be a compromise. It would be a betrayal of the only person who truly mattered, himself. Musashi taught that the warrior must learn to see the void. The void is not emptiness. It is clarity. It is the space that remains when all the false things have been stripped away. Most people fear the void because they have built their entire identity on what they own, what they do, and what others think of them. When those things are removed, they believe they will disappear. But Musashi knew that the opposite is true. You do not disappear in the void. You appear. For the first time, you see yourself as you actually are. Not as you wish to be, not as others expect you to be, but as you are. And that is the beginning of all real power. David spent the next 3 months in a kind of silence he had never experienced before. He moved out of his apartment and into a small room in a shared house. He sold most of his possessions. He stopped checking social media. He stopped explaining himself to people who didn't understand. He let friendships fade that had only survived through habit. He stopped filling his calendar with distractions. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. He began to hear himself, not his thoughts, not his fears, but the deeper voice underneath all of that, the one that had been trying to speak to him for years, the one he had drowned out with noise, with work, with relationships, with anything that kept him from listening. That voice told him what he already knew but had been afraid to admit. He wanted to write, not blogs, not emails, but real writing. The kind that required him to sit alone for hours and wrestle with ideas that frightened him. The kind that had no guarantee of success, no clear path, no safety net. The kind that most people dismiss as impractical, indulgent, or naive. But he didn't care anymore what most people thought, because most people were living lives they didn't want, doing work they didn't care about, trapped in patterns they were too afraid to break. And he was done being most people. Musashi's final teaching, written in the days before his death, was this: do nothing which is of no use. 5 words. But within them, the entire philosophy of the warrior. Every technique he mastered, every duel he fought, every word he wrote came down to this single principle. Eliminate the useless, cut away the weak. Do not add what you do not need. Do not keep what does not serve. The path of mastery is not a path of more. It is a path of less distraction, less compromise, less pretending, until all that remains is the essential. And the essential, Musashi knew, is all you ever needed. David wrote every day. Not because he wanted to, but because not writing felt like dying. He wrote badly at first. He wrote in circles, repeating himself, unsure of what he was trying to say. But he kept going, not out of discipline, not out of ambition, but because he had finally aligned his life with the only thing that felt true. He was no longer pretending. He was no longer performing. He was no longer carrying the weight of who he thought he should be. He was simply doing the one thing he could not live without doing. And that, he understood, was freedom. Months passed. He published nothing. He earned nothing. He told no one what he was doing. People from his old life reached out occasionally, asking how he was, what he was up to, if he was okay. He kept his answers short. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. Because the truth was, he didn't need their approval anymore. He didn't need their validation. He didn't need them to understand. He had cut away the need to be understood. And in doing so, he had become unshakable. There is a concept in Zen Buddhism called mu, which means nothingness or the void. It is often misunderstood as absence, as emptiness in the negative sense. But mu is not about lacking. It is about potential. It is the space where everything is possible because nothing is fixed. Musashi embodied this. He did not define himself by his victories, his reputation, or his legacy. He defined himself by his willingness to let go, to release the old, to walk away from what no longer served, to enter the void again and again, knowing that the void is where transformation lives. David's transformation did not look like the stories he had watched online. He did not become rich. He did not become famous. He did not build an empire or gain thousands of followers. But he became something more valuable. He became free. Free from the need to prove himself. Free from the need to impress others. Free from the need to live a life that looked successful to people whose opinions didn't matter. He had cut away everything that weakened him, and what remained was strong. Musashi's rule is not complicated. It does not require talent, money, or luck. It requires only one thing: the courage to let go. The courage to look at your life honestly and identify what is draining you. The relationships that exhaust you, the work that numbs you, the habits that keep you small, the beliefs that no longer serve you, the version of yourself you have outgrown, and then, with the precision of a swordsman, to cut them away, not with anger, not with regret, but with clarity. Because you understand that every ounce of energy you waste on what does not matter is energy stolen from what does. Most people will never do this. They will spend their entire lives adding, accumulating, collecting, and carrying. They will fill their calendars, their homes, their minds, and their hearts with things they do not need and do not want. They will mistake fullness for richness. They will confuse distraction for living. And they will die having never known the lightness that comes from living with only what is essential. But you are not most people. You are reading this because some part of you already knows the truth. Some part of you is ready to cut. The samurai did not carry extra swords. They did not bring unnecessary armor. They did not waste energy on unnecessary movements. They understood that survival depended on speed, clarity, and focus, and all three require elimination. The same is true for your life. You cannot move quickly when you are weighed down. You cannot think clearly when your mind is cluttered. You cannot focus on what matters when you are distracted by what doesn't. The path forward is not found by adding more. It is found by removing what is in the way. David still writes every day. He still lives simply. He still says no to most things. But now when he wakes up in the morning, the dread is gone. In its place is something he had almost forgotten existed. Calm, not happiness, not excitement, but a deep, steady calm that comes from knowing he is living in alignment with his truth. He is no longer performing. He is no longer pretending. He is no longer carrying the weight of a life he was never meant to live. He cut away what weakened him, and what remains is enough. Musashi died in that cave on Mount Iwato alone. At the age of 61, he had no wealth, he had no family, he had no students beside him. But he died free, free from attachment, free from fear, free from the need to be anything other than what he was. And in his final words, he left behind the simplest and most powerful instruction a warrior can follow. Cut away what weakens you. Keep only what makes you strong, and live the rest of your life in that strength, without apology, without compromise, and without regret.